She emerged from the edge of the forest like a shadow, silent, limping, her entire body soaked in the cold snow. Her fur was matted, streaked with mud and blood. In her mouth, she carried a tiny creature, a bobcat kitten, barely alive, its limp body showing only the faintest sign of life, a breath thin as mist. She didn't roar, she didn't cry. She simply stood there in the falling snow, her gaze fixed on the door of the house, as if she knew who was inside, and she knew what he had lost. What happened next didn't just change their fates. It unearthed long-buried secrets and lit a fragile thread that none of the three, a man, a wild animal, and a dying heart, could have expected. This wasn't a rescue story. This was how they saved him. If you believe that love, even from a wild creature, can still heal the seemingly unhealable, stay with us and comment on where in the world you're watching this from. Because this story will stay with you long after the last flame goes out. Daniel hadn't answered his phone in weeks, not because it didn't ring, but because there was no one worth answering for anymore. His house, a plain home at the end of a lonely dirt road leading into the forest, had become a gravestone without a name. No voices, no sounds, and no reason to wake up each morning. Until that morning, when he cracked the door to check the weather and saw the figure, a dark silhouette in the whiteout, gaunt body, trembling, a mother bobcat, wild, uncollared, voiceless, just in pain, and something else. Something nameless. And then he saw the kitten, a blood-soaked bobcat cub, eyes shut tight, soft as wet grass, held gently between her sharp teeth, yet completely unharmed. She looked at Daniel not like a wild beast, but like a mother, desperately pleading, not with words, but with her eyes. Daniel froze. His legs felt nailed to the floor, that gaze, pierced straight into a place he had locked up years ago. He no longer trusted himself to make decisions, no longer believed he had the strength to change anything. But she didn't beg, didn't scream. She just stood there, holding her baby like it was the last time, as if she had searched all winter for just one person, him. Daniel stepped outside, not even realizing he was moving. His hands acted on their own. The medic in him, buried under memory, came alive again. He reached out and took the bobcat kitten, still warm but barely. And strangely, she let him. No growl, no resistance, as if in that moment she had placed her entire trust in the hands of a man she'd never known. She didn't enter the house. She sat right at the doorstep, in the snowstorm like a silent guard, her eyes never leaving the door, not out of suspicion, but out of hope. And Daniel, for the first time in years, did something even he didn't understand. He let them in, both of them, mother and child, not out of pity, but because something deep, something ancient, had begun to stir. Inside the house, warming slowly from a flickering fire, Daniel laid the bobcat cub on the kitchen table. Each breath was a question, each passing second, a gamble. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from memory. Another table, another emergency, a life he couldn't save, a death that had destroyed him in a different way. The mother bobcat sat there, soaked and shivering, eyes tracking his every move. Not afraid, not fierce, just one thing, a fragile trust suspended between life and death. And when Daniel looked into her eyes, he knew. He didn't want to let go again. Outside, the wind howled. The snow raged, but inside that house, a thread had formed. Not by chance, but by something deeper, pain, instinct, or perhaps fate. And as the fire rose, casting warm light on cold walls, Daniel whispered, unsure if to the bobcat cub or to himself. I've got you now. If something inside you just stirred reading this, stay with us. Because what's about to happen isn't just a fight for survival. It's fate, answering back to a man the world had almost forgotten. The moment Daniel placed the bobcat cub on the table, time seemed to slow. Outside, the blizzard screamed as if the universe itself understood. Tonight, in this modest corner of the world, would no longer be a place where a man forgot how to live, but a battlefield between life and death. Daniel dropped to his knees, pulling out an old, faded medical kit from under the sink. His hands shook as he touched each familiar item. Gauze, antiseptic, tiny forceps. His fingers remembered the rhythm, each motion once meant to save lives, now resurfacing from the ashes of regret. The little body was ice cold, breathing ragged, each breath spaced out like waiting for the inevitable. Daniel wrapped the cub in a thick towel, pressed it near the fire, gently rubbing its chest, whispering nonsense but heartfelt words. "Don't give up, little one. I'm still here." The mother bobcat remained motionless, didn't blink once, didn't move forward or back, just watched, steady and silent, as if her heartbeat depended on her baby's breath. She was no longer wild. She was a mother. Then the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness. Daniel cursed softly. The generator wouldn't start. Snow had frozen the backup fuel lines. Now the fire was all that remained. For warmth, for light, and for hope. He cradled the bobcat kitten closer to the hearth, where the flames painted streaks of orange across skin and despair. And then, memory returned. Not this scene, but another night. A slippery road, a scream, the smell of burning gasoline and the sound of tearing metal, his daughter's tiny hand slipping from his, light as snow, but enough to collapse a lifetime. Since that night, Daniel had stopped trying to save anyone. He thought he didn't deserve to, that he wasn't enough anymore. But tonight, something was different. He wasn't trying to save the world, just one tiny heart, one soul that hadn't yet felt enough. He melted snow to make warm water, soaked a cloth, and placed it gently on the cub's chest. Each breath was a fragile glow, a question unanswered. He stayed up all night, not tired, just afraid to blink. Every few minutes, the bobcat cub would twitch, letting out a soft whimper. Each sound was a victory, each silence a held breath. But what broke Daniel's heart wasn't the cub's condition, it was the mother still standing there, unmoving, unsleeping, unwavering. She was like a ghost on watch, not afraid to die, not needing salvation, only needed her baby to live. Daniel looked at her for a long time, a love so complete that even the pain inside him became bearable. Not gone, but lighter, because now he didn't have to carry it alone. Dawn crept in like the first breath after a suffocating night. The fire crackled like a heartbeat. The young bobcat stirred, then let out a faint whimper, weak but alive. Daniel exhaled. His eyes were wet. He whispered, "Good job, kid." And perhaps he was speaking to himself. You think this is where it ends? Not yet, because Daniel is about to discover something buried in the snow, not just a secret, but a threat. As the sun rose higher, the storm had eased, but the cold still slipped through every crack in the walls and door. Daniel hadn't slept a minute. He sat blankly by the fireplace, eyes fixed on the bobcat cub sleeping in an old blanket. He had named it Echo, a name that slipped from his mouth unconsciously, as if whispered into his ear. Echo was still weak, but breathing steadily. And the mother, she still wouldn't leave the door. Half asleep, half on watch, like a silent prayer never spoken. Daniel looked at her, then softly said, "You look like a Nora." Her ears twitched, a small motion, but Daniel felt she understood. Not just the name, but the feeling of being seen, acknowledged as a soul. But something inside Daniel was still unsettled. Nora kept looking out the snow-covered window, not aimlessly, but tracking, as if whatever she'd been running from hadn't given up yet. He put on an extra jacket, slid into his old boots, and followed her gaze. The forest was quiet. Snow knee-deep. Every step felt like treading through memory. The earth wasn't silent, it was holding its breath. And then, just 20 steps from the house, he saw the signs, not just claw marks, but boot prints, chaotic, overlapping, bloodied. His heart pounded. He followed the tracks to a shallow clearing near the frozen stream. A small camp, torn, buried in snow, ripped canvas, crushed tin cans, and worse, a piece of paracord tangled in a blood-stained cloth. Next to it, a metal tag frozen in ice. Daniel picked it up. 3 letters etched coldly. J.K.C. He didn't know why, but his gut twisted, and for the first time in years, he felt watched. He didn't run, but turned back, moving faster, every step pulsing with caution. When he returned, Nora was already waiting. Her face was tense. Echo whimpered from the blanket. Daniel shut the door, locked it tight. And when Nora stepped forward, resting her head against his leg, not wild, not begging, Daniel understood. It was a whisper. "Don't go back there again." For the first time in months, another living being touched him. For the first time, Daniel let it happen. His hand brushed gently over Nora's head. The fireplace crackled like a whisper from someone long gone. He turned the tag in his fingers, repeating a question he already knew the answer to. "Where did you come from, Nora?" And then Daniel would realize. They hadn't just stumbled upon him by chance. They had escaped from a hell to find the last person who could still save. And that hell, it was still out there. But what truly broke Daniel open wasn't the wind. It was the silence, not outside, but inside. He was used to snowstorms, but there were other storms, ones that lived in the chest. For so long he thought he had turned to stone. No one knew, not even him, that this time of year was always the hardest. Not because of Christmas, not because of loneliness, but because this was when he lost them. Miriam, his wife, and Ellie, the girl with sunlight in her hair. Just one thin patch of black ice, one sliding truck, half a second too slow. He had been driving. He had screamed, but it still exploded. He couldn't stop it. He still saw the crumpled car like a crushed can, steam rising from the hood, the smell of burning rubber mixed with blood in the cold air. And Ellie, her tiny hand reaching for him in that final moment when the world shattered. That night didn't just kill them. It killed him, bit by bit. Not with death, but with the life that remained. And for years, Daniel wandered through that wreckage, looking for someone to blame. Then always returning to the mirror. That's why he hid here. Not to live. Just to wait for the earth to bury him before the world remembered to. But now, Nora is lying there, and Echo, still breathing faintly in the blanket. And in that fragile breath, something flickered. Not a miracle, but a reason to stay awake. He added more wood. The fire blazed higher, red as a wound that never healed. The power had been out for hours. The generator froze. But inside that house, there was still light, from the fire and from something unnamed. Daniel leaned over, placed a hand on Echo's chest. Still warm, still alive. Nora crept closer. Her chin rested lightly on his knee. No begging, no plea, just wanting to be near. He didn't pull away, didn't flinch. That touch, soft as fur but enough to bring him back to earth. Then a sound. Scratch, scratch. A scraping, faint. Then again. Not wind, not tree, but something intentional. Daniel stood up. His heart pounded like a drum. Nora sprang up at the same moment, ears erect, back arched. No barking, no retreat. He grabbed the flashlight, stepped slowly toward the window. The beam swept across the frosted glass and saw nothing. No one. Only tracks. In the snow, a blend of animal prints and human boots, smeared, intertwined, as if some old memory was clawing its way back, warped and demanding blood. The wind howled, slicing through his bones. Daniel didn't blink. "Not this time," he whispered. He slammed the door, drew the curtain, and bolted it tight. Then sat down between Nora and Echo. The firelight lit his face, no longer that of a man who had given up. "Not tonight," he whispered. "Not anymore. Because some storms come from outside, but others, they live in our chest. And when a man dares to face them, not just to survive, but to heal, something changes. But this storm, it isn't over yet." Dawn came with a strange kind of light. Quiet, but like a warning disguised as peace. The snow softened, but the cold thickened. Daniel sat by Echo, watching him breathe. No longer limp. There was color in the gums, a twitch near the claws, a little strength in the lungs. Progress. But Daniel knew. Healing doesn't mean safe. Sometimes it's just the eye of the storm before the second wave hits. He leaned down to check Echo's body temperature again, and then he saw something. A patch of skin on Echo's side, dark, uneven. He parted the fur gently. His heart jumped. Not a bruise, not a scratch. A burn, round, sharp-edged, as if it had been branded. His stomach twisted. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this. Someone once owned Echo. The thought hit him like ice water. Nora and Echo hadn't simply gotten lost in the woods and stumbled on a lit house. They were escaping, not from snow, but from someone. Daniel shot up like he'd been shocked. He rushed to the wooden cabinet in the corner, flung it open, pulled out an old, dusty satellite unit, the only connection left to the outside world, especially with the phone lines long dead. He booted up the laptop, an emergency machine so old the keys clicked like brittle bones. His fingers typed non-stop. Keywords: animal trafficking, illegal breeding camps, wildlife branding. An hour later, he stopped. The screen flickered with photos from a raid on an illegal dog camp in Idaho last year. Hidden deep in the mountains, discovered through an anonymous tip. The images hit him like a punch. Cages stacked like shipping crates, puppies crammed into metal boxes, some missing legs, some missing eyes. The smell of blood and rust seemed to seep through the screen, and then Daniel saw it, a worn metal tag on one of the rescued animals, 3 faint letters, JKC. He pulled the tag from his coat pocket, the one he'd found in the woods the day before. Cold as ice, but the engraving is still clear. A match. His heart thundered. This wasn't a coincidence. Nora wasn't some random wild animal. She was a mother who had escaped hell, and with primal instinct, she had found the one man in this snow-bound wilderness who once knew how to save a life. Suddenly, the radio in the corner blared with static. It was still off. Daniel turned the dial. A faint emergency channel crackled to life, a voice from the local ranger unit. Suspicious vehicle spotted. Black, no plates. Heading south, possible animal transport. Daniel went cold. They were looking for her, and maybe they knew. Maybe they were coming back. He looked at Nora. She stood frozen at the door, eyes locked on the handle as if she had heard everything. In that moment, Daniel understood. No more hiding, no more waiting, no more letting the world slip past him. Not this time. He lunged for the storage closet, pulled out old wooden planks, nails, a hammer, anything he could use to board the windows, seal the doors, block the gaps. Each hammer strike, each blow carried the rage of a man who'd swallowed too much for too long. The fire in him, long thought extinguished, now blazed like that of a father who lost a child, a husband who lost a wife, but still had someone to protect. Not just one, but two. As the sun dipped behind the distant trees, the snow took on a haunting orange hue. Inside the house, now sealed like a fortress, Daniel stood in the center, hammer in hand, shirt soaked in sweat, chest heaving, heart pounding. For the first time in years, he was fully awake, because now he knew. This wasn't a rescue. This was a fight. And when night fell once again, the wind no longer howled. It fell silent, but not because it had calmed, because it was listening. The snow began to fall more slowly, as if moving in slow motion. Beautiful, but deceptive, as if the storm had only paused, so something darker could slither through quietly. Daniel sat in the kitchen. In front of him, a heap of tools had been hastily discarded after the fortifications. The door was locked, the windows sealed. Every crack, every gap had been checked twice. Nora hadn't left the front door. She lay still, ears raised like living antennas. Echo was still weak, but he could move now. Occasionally whimpered, not as helpless as before. Daniel had just started to feel himself relax when it came. A knock. Not loud, not rushed. Just a soft tap. Tock, tock. Like someone testing wood. Daniel's body snapped taut. Nora jumped up. Her ears twitched sharply. A deep, low growl rumbled from her throat, not threatening, but the kind of sound born from the deepest memory of instinct, fear that once had form. Daniel stepped to the door. He didn't open it, didn't speak. He simply pressed his eye to the peephole, one he had drilled himself years ago, back when he still believed no one would ever come here. Outside, standing quietly in the falling snow, was a man, mid-40s, clean, wearing a thick forest green coat with a wildlife control patch stitched over the left breast. Only something was off. He stood like an actor playing a role. Too neat, too put together. He didn't belong here. Not in these woods. Not in snow, storm, and blood. "Good evening," the man said, his voice light, like someone visiting an inn, just smooth, unsullied by wind or road. "Sorry to bother. We received a report about a stray animal. Might have passed through this area. An adult female bobcat, traveling with a cub. Have you seen anything?" Daniel felt his stomach knot. Not because of the question, but because of how it was asked. The tone he used for the word animal, like he was referring to lost property, and that look, the way his eyes scanned, corners of the door, edges of the curtain, as if drawing a map. But what confirmed it for Daniel was this. The man already knew. He wasn't searching, he was confirming, and that was terrifying. Daniel stepped back slightly. His voice came from behind the door. "There's no animal here, just me." A pause. "Would you mind if I had a quick look around?" Still that soft tone. "I would." This time, the silence stretched longer. "Suit yourself," the man said. But in his voice was something like a smile, with no lips smiling. "Take care. Out here in the middle of nowhere. Gets awfully lonely." Then he turned, slowly walking back toward the woods. No more questions, no pressure, just vanished, like mist slipping into the shadows. Daniel stood frozen. His breath fogged the window glass. His eyes tracked the man's footprints until they too faded, like they'd never existed. Minutes passed, then an hour, only when he began to believe the man might actually be gone. Nora growled, sharp and sudden like a blade. She lunged toward the back of the house. Echo whimpered in his nest, panic rising. Daniel followed the growl, reached the rear window. He didn't need a flashlight because the moon was unnaturally bright that night. And he saw a figure. That coat, it was him. No light, no urgency, just silently, circling the house, as if it were already his. Daniel's instincts screamed. He ran to the fireplace, pulled the old shotgun from the rack, dusty but heavy as ever in his hands. He threw open the back door, stepped out into the snow. His boots crushed the frozen ground like brittle bones. The man turned. Their eyes met. "Final warning," Daniel said, his voice cold as steel in winter. The man only smiled. This time, without hiding it. "You really think they'll be safe here forever?" Then he vanished, faded into the forest like a creature born to disappear. Daniel stood in the snow, his heart pounding like war drums. There was no more doubt. There was no more doubt. Nora and Echo hadn't just escaped abuse. They were being hunted. And as night swallowed the house again, Daniel didn't sleep. He couldn't. Adrenaline had frozen in his bloodstream. Every whisper of wind, every creak of shrinking wood, he heard as if the forest itself were warning him. Nora didn't sleep. She paced across the floor like a silent ghost. Each claw tap against the boards counted down like a ticking clock. Echo whimpered in his dreams, unaware that outside, something was waiting. By 3 a.m., the woods were deathly still. Not quiet, suspended, as if something had stopped. Not because it left, but because it was watching. And then the sound returned. It wasn't a knock. It was the sound of metal striking metal, soft but deliberate, coming from the direction of the shed. Daniel was on his feet faster than his age should allow, left hand gripping a flashlight, right hand clutching the shotgun still resting beside the hearth since the night before. Nora growled low. A deep, sustained note pulled straight from the chest like a drawn bowstring. No barking, just a warning from the bones. They crossed the dark kitchen, Daniel opening the back door with his shoulder. The cold bit at his skin like sharp teeth, but it was fear that truly froze him. The shed was only about 7 meters away, but tonight it looked like a breathing shadow. The door hung ajar. Just enough. Not enough to see inside, but enough for someone to have entered. Daniel swept the light. In the snow, boot prints fresh and clear, leading straight in. No tracks coming out. He was still in there. Daniel gripped the gun tightly. His voice rang out, sharp and firm. "Come out. Now I haven't pulled the trigger yet." Silence. Only the wind slapping against the metal siding. Daniel stepped closer. Nora remained frozen beside him, her back arched, fur raised, growl rising like a tightened wire about to snap. And then he stepped out. Still wearing that forest green coat, still the same smooth, emotionless face. But this time, the smile was gone. Only his eyes remained, cold and calculating. He raised both hands, like mocking surrender. "Relax. I just wanted to make sure they're still alive." Daniel didn't lower the gun. Why? The man shrugged. Because they're valuable. That little one? He's branded. Want to hear how much one like him goes for? Daniel froze. Each word felt like a nail to the chest. Echo wasn't just a victim. He had been a product, an item, a number, a piece of property with a price etched in flesh. You're not taking them anywhere, Daniel said, voice dry, rough as gravel. The man took a step forward, slower now, his tone dropping into a hiss. You're not a cop. No one knows you're out here. No signal, no neighbors. If you disappear tonight, no one will come. And in that exact moment, Nora lunged. No warning, no hesitation. She became a fire streaking across snow, a missile of fury erupting from months of buried rage. She slammed into his leg with full force. The man crashed down, crying out. A small handgun slipped from his coat, skidding across the ice. Daniel kicked it away, shotgun still aimed, heart pounding like battle drums. Nora stood over him, growling deep, eyes flashing in the flashlight's beam, her teeth bared, not as a threat, as judgment. Daniel rushed into the shed, grabbed an old rope. He tied the man's hands tightly behind his back, dragged him to the front porch, bound him to the base of a tree with all the strength and rage that had gone unspent for years. The man didn't struggle, just muttered, voice bitter and coarse. They weren't born to survive. Defective stock. That's why they're cheap. Daniel turned, looked at him like trash. A nausea rose from his gut like boiling oil. You're wrong, he said, voice steady, almost eerily calm. They survived you. That makes them stronger than you already. Back inside, Echo whimpered, as if sensing something had changed. Daniel knelt, placed a hand on the small, frail back. Still warm, still trembling, but no longer alone. Nora stepped inside behind him, no longer the guard at the door, but a part of the home. She curled around Echo, resting her chin on his back. And for the first time that long night, she closed her eyes. Daniel watched them and realized. Maybe Nora hadn't brought Echo here by chance. Not because he was just some stranger in a snow-covered forest, but because she knew. She saw something in him, something broken, but still willing to fight, still able to believe. Everything changed, because in the final part of this story, the world would learn what really happened in that snowbound house, and the bond between a broken man and two forgotten souls would become something that even the cruelest couldn't touch. Stay with us. Because this ending dash will warm the coldest part of your heart. The first light of morning didn't just break the dark. It cracked open something inside Daniel. A warmth, not from the fire, but from something more fragile. Hope. Echo, still weak, was breathing steadily. He nuzzled into his mother's belly like anchoring himself to life, as if to say, I'm still here. And Nora, after a night of holding back the dark, rested her head on Daniel's old boot and closed her eyes. For the first time, she allowed someone else to stand watch. Outside on the porch, the man tied to the tree was no longer threatening. His voice now came only in pleas, starting with sarcasm, ending in despair. Daniel said nothing. He didn't need to, because as the sun rose, the sound arrived, crunching, heavy and sure, tires rolling over frozen snow. Two black trucks emerged silently from the forest. No sirens, no lights, but they carried the weight of winter, bowing its head. State and federal agency logos were clearly marked on their sides. Daniel stepped onto the porch, gun lowered, shoulders still stiff, but his eyes had softened. Doors opened. A woman led the team, Angela Cortez from the Wildlife Crimes Unit. A name Daniel hadn't spoken in years, but someone he had once trusted. Back then, she was a rookie. Today, she led the team that came. "You sent the coordinates?" Daniel nodded. "And the photos, the metal tag, and him." Angela glanced at the man trembling beneath the tree, then looked back at Daniel. "You just cut off the last leg of an illegal breeding and trafficking ring across 3 states. Daniel didn't smile. He didn't need to. But his shoulders dropped as if the final weight had been lifted. Inside, the rescue team carefully placed Echo into a soft carrier, holding him as if carrying breath itself. They documented the burn, took blood samples, recorded everything. But when someone tried to separate Nora for examination, she growled, low and firm like electricity humming through the ground. Not an attack. A warning. "She stays with her baby," Daniel said, voice not raised, but no one dared defy it. "They're not broken. They're healing, together." Angela nodded. "Then we'll care for both together." That evening, at the rescue center near town, Daniel sat on a small stage, reluctantly. He didn't want cameras, didn't want to be a hero, but the center needed him to speak, not in reports, but from the heart. He stood. Nora lay at his feet. Echo slept quietly in his arms, wrapped in a new blanket embroidered with his daughter's name. Ellie. Daniel cleared his throat, then began. "I used to be someone who saved people, or at least I thought I was, until I lost my wife, lost my daughter. I thought the world had gone silent until the day she showed up. Not out of hope, but because she refused to stop. She carried her child through wind, snow, and danger, and somewhere along that path, she gave me something I wasn't looking for, a reason not to die." The room fell silent. No handkerchief could catch all the tears that followed. Daniel looked down at Nora. "She trusted me, even when I didn't trust myself anymore, and I think she didn't come here by accident. I think she was sent." The video spread across the world. A man is saving a bobcat cub. A mother bobcat saves a man. And one fragile heartbeat, pulling 2 shattered worlds back together. Comments flooded in like waves about grief, rebirth, and the miracle of second chances. Months later, Daniel's home looked different. Not newer, but alive. Nora's bed sat beside the fireplace. Echo was now twice his size, strong enough to chase squirrels and play in fallen leaves. Daniel reopened part of the shed. Not to store tools, but to build a small rescue outpost where lost creatures could find their first breath again. One afternoon, Daniel walked to the edge of his land, the far end of the garden. In his hand, a simple flower. He knelt before a small gravestone bearing his daughter's name, placed the flower on the soft earth. Beside him, Nora sat silently. Echo curled against his leg, breathing steadily. "I think you sent them," he whispered. "And this time, I listened. Because some miracles don't happen in a moment. They grow through a mother's tears, through a man's sorrow, and through the stubborn life force of a being once treated like property. If you've stayed with us this far, maybe a part of you understands too. Healing isn't magic, it's a choice, made over and over again. Until one day, you're no longer just surviving. You finally come home." If this story touched your heart, let us know where in the world you're watching from. And don't forget to share it with someone who still needs a reason to believe. One more time.